Okay, let's begin. I've got 9 o'clock on my calendar. If everybody could take their positions, we will start this proceeding. Certainly appreciate you being here. Hopefully we won't have too much hot air to warm up the room any more than it is here today, but we appreciate you being here. I think that those who attend this meeting on a regular basis recognize we've got some new folks on the board. We're certainly pleased to welcome Lonnie Roberts to the board. Lonnie is here on the end. Lonnie is the Chief Executive Officer for TRH Health Systems. Been in that position the last 15 years or so. He's an Alabama native. We felt like we couldn't get along on this board without an Alabama native, so since Dick Ray is no longer on the board, we had to get an Alabama native here to replace Dick. Lonnie has served on the executive board of the Tennessee Business Roundtable and a number of other boards, so we're certainly pleased. We believe he brings a lot of experience and talent to this board, and we're certainly pleased to have him. The other new member of the board is Mike Edwards. Mike is a executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, Knoxville. He's been in that position for a number of years. He's also served on a number of committees for this board. He is on the round table and has a lot of experience, so we're pleased also to have Mike on the board. He couldn't be with us today, but we'll be here for our next meeting. We're also pleased and excited that Carolyn Perry is returning to the board. Carolyn was reappointed, and she has served as vice chair of this board and has done a great job, and we're pleased with the current board. We're also pleased to have Chip with us continuing. Chip is our student member, and is like the rest of us, you're appointed to this board until you're replaced. And Chip is no longer in high school. He will start college career at Belmont here in the next couple of weeks. But until he's replaced with another student, he's on this board. So, Chip, you may be here for 3 or 4 more meetings. We were pleased to have you, and I think everybody here recognizes that Chip certainly is one of the strongest student members we've had of this board, and certainly appreciate his contributions. Also note that our commissioner is visiting school systems today. He's up in Johnson County, so he's about as far away from here as you can get in state of Tennessee. But Patrick, we're pleased to have you with us today. We'll move to the agenda, which was been distributed. We'll start with the consent agenda. It does include approval of the agenda for today's meeting, and we've made a couple of changes in that agenda that was distributed one time. We've added an alternate salary schedule as item 3O at the end of the item 3 final readings. And we have removed the standards for Algebra 2, which was item 3N. Also, we've got the minutes in that consent agenda for meetings of April 15th, June 14th, and July the 29th. The July 29th minutes were distributed to us yesterday. So is there a motion that we approve the consent agenda? Got a motion. Is there a second? Got a second. Any questions, discussion, items change on the anything on the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Consent agenda is approved. We'll move to the action items on first reading. The first one is the pre-service teacher performance assessment, and David is going to present that. David?
Yesterday you had the opportunity to hear from Marcy Singer-Gabella of Vanderbilt University, a lengthy presentation around this and the sort of payoffs they are hoping for around looking at teachers finishing a pre-service assessment as or performance assessment as completion of their pre-service training program that will involve videotaping and independent scoring. And you also heard how that same program weaves into the Ready to Teach program, as you heard from Dr. Candy Hill Clark yesterday from the Board of Regents. The item you're actually acting on is to allow the successful completion of that performance assessment that's part of their pre-service program to substitute for the Principles of Learning and Teaching, the appropriate Principles of Learning and Teaching exam that those candidates would sit for. They've done a cross-reference to the professional licensure standards and feel comfortable that there's alignment, and this is done for a pilot year. They're going to do a national standard setting around that to make sure that what they are measuring is what gets measured, and then report back to us with results. And I'll happily answer any questions you might have.
Okay, questions for David? David, has the Advisory Council on Teacher Education reviewed this, or?
They've actually reviewed it a couple of times at different meetings, and they've been plugged in with this since the beginning. Gosh, Dr. Nixon, almost 2 years now. We've had them sort of woven into the mix on this. Yes, sir.
Okay, I think when the advisory, and I don't, and maybe I just missed it. The write-up does not identify that the advisory council has been involved. I think it's good to include, a reference to their involvement when they have been involved. One question: it's a new term for me that's back there. It's Metacog skills on rubric 8 back there. Would you enlighten me on what Metacog skills are?
Metacognitive skills are thinking about thinking, and being a reflective practitioner. Would be the easiest way I could define that off the cuff, Chairman.
Okay. Well, I have trouble keeping up with all the vocabulary acronyms that are used around here, and I appreciate that enlightenment. Any questions for David on this? We did have a good presentation on this yesterday. I think it is a step forward, and we'll be using it to try to work out the bugs and so forth. But I think it's got good promise for evaluation of new teachers.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
David, I might have missed this yesterday, but all of institutions that have teacher education programs, will they be able to be involved in this process?
This is an opt-in program rather than, because it's a pilot right now. I think, we have a good program in place for determining whether a teacher understands the standards, the pedagogy standards, the how to teach standards, and we vet that through the Praxis exam currently. That's a strong program that we still support, still recognize. This is just another track that some institutions are taking. As you heard yesterday, you've got several larger programs. I would guess that those make up the majority of teachers we train in the state. Other universities have also expressed an interest. I don't have a list for you of them off the top of my head, but I can tell you that there's a lot of interest around performance assessment in the field right now, as that field is undergoing a lot of change.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
David, I just have one confirmation. This does not take the place of any content requirements, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And so this is strictly around the pedagogy aspects. Now, it is embedded with content. I mean, you are watching someone teach what they are going to be licensed to teach, which is, that's nice. And so around that, it's really hard to separate the two. They're hand glove issues, teaching and knowing what you're teaching about. So, but it does not change any requirements that a person would need to have, nor does it change the fact that they still need to pass a test in the content area, that Praxis 2 content knowledge test.
Okay, other questions for David? Okay, is there a motion we approve on first reading the pre-service teacher performance assessment? Got a motion, second? Got a second? Any further questions, discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, David. Next item B, is the preliminary list of textbooks for visual arts, music, all kinds of things here. Morgan, you got to enlighten us on that?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
You have before you the preliminary list. Actually, it's an abstract of the main titles of the preliminary list that's been bid for this year. The actual list is about 300 pages, including all the ancillaries. So in saving the forest, I thought it would be better just to give you the main books. But these books have been bid by the publishers. They have been reviewed by a cadre of teachers in all subject areas listed. Presently, those reviews are being sent to publishers for responses, and we ask that you approve this preliminary list for these subject areas for Section 6. In November, I will be coming with the final list.
Okay. Questions for Morgan? Okay, I think that we all recognize that, we really depend on the textbook folks to go through this process and bring good recommendations to us. We don't get really involved in looking at all these books and so forth. I guess the only question I would have, Morgan, is whether, we put a lot of effort and time and expense into this whole textbook review process. And I guess I'm just wondering if it adds as much value as it does cost for, the time that we're spending on these things, and whether we're really, bottom line, getting some value out of the process, the extensive process that's used to review all these textbooks.
I think so, Mr. Chairman, because otherwise every system will have to go through this process. I think it'll be a more costly process that way. This way, every system has access to all the reviews done by the cadre of teachers. They do a review for themselves. Basically, the list of books is a broad list, and then they narrow down each system. Talking with publishers over the years, I think they say that Tennessee has one of the best processes of reviewing the books.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the preliminary list of textbooks? Got a motion? Second? Second? Anybody got a second? Any questions? Any additional discussion? Yeah, Jean?
Just going on what you were saying, I mean, why do you need another spelling book?
Well, the cycle goes in every 6 years. We're looking at all the language arts. Since now all the curriculum is integrated, we're looking. The commission is looking at the spelling and so forth. Just an update. We have new vocabulary coming out. New words like metacog.
Yeah.
So those things are updated each day. The spelling is integrated. It's not separate now from language arts. So we only had one spelling book bid. Last time we had about 5. So it's been integrated into each subject area.
So we just purchase books every 6 years is what this is.
Right. There's a cycle for each subject.
Okay. Any other questions?
My concern, are these going to be working with the Common Core, or when the Common Core, are we going to have to immediately turn around and give new books out at that point?
These books have been reviewed according to our state standards and also the Common Core standards.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you.
ESL policy 3.207 revision. David, you go do that?
I am. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair and members. This is really just some technical corrections to some of the language but really the thing that's probably most interesting in it is the change of staffing ratios going from 45 teachers per ESL teacher load to 40. And that was done because at one time we had a real struggle finding ESL teachers. In many places we still do, don't get me wrong, but that has gotten better over time. And we were trying to find appropriate ways to deliver instruction, and some districts were still having success with 45, but really now they feel like they can do staffing at 40. This has been some guidance from the federal government around English language learners, and so we bring this to you to adjust that staffing ratio.
Okay. Questions for David? Okay, really, I think kind of, like you said, a technical correction of catching up with where we are. Is there a motion that we approve? Got a motion, second? Got a second. Okay, any further questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move to the action items on final reading. Item A is the identification of persistently lowest achieving school policy. And Art, you go do that?
Good morning. As you will remember at the last board meeting, this is a second reading item, and this is really kind of updating the definition of persistently low achieving schools. The one technical correction, which is kind of noted on the back of the cover page, is the deletion of a specific multiplier factor that was heavily weighing if a school had failed to make AYP 6 or more years. There was a multiplier that was added to that, thereby kind of exacerbating the progress of the school. And so in place of that, you'll note on the agenda item in 7, the number 7 there, it says, lastly, 5% of the schools with the highest numerical rank index are identified. And so it's kind of updating the step by which persistently low achieving schools are identified by the state. That is a general summary of the agenda item.
Okay. Okay, questions for Art? Any questions, discussion? Okay, is there a motion that we approve? Got final reading, got a motion, second. Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Art. Okay, now go to the definition of a Tennessee public school, item 3B. This is a rule.
Get me again.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. This is the item that around just deletes seat time requirements for summer school. Pardon me. I'm wrong. That's the next one. I apologize. Yeah. This is the adult high school that deletes the seat time contact. Are we on? Oh, I apologize. I've got 3 in a row. This removes one plant from the language. Thank you. It's going to be really challenging to have a virtual school when there's a building requirement. And so this is the way we realized that one plant was hemming us up a little bit in terms of that language. So now that I've sort of found my place, maybe these virtual schools can find their place. And just by deleting that, it still requires all the other accountability measures, all the other things that all other schools must have, except a brick and mortar structure.
Okay. So really, this one just basically eliminates the one plant provision that was part of that rule. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Is there a motion that we approve? Got a motion? Second. Second, Lonnie. Okay. Any questions, discussion? Okay, this is a rule, so we need to have a roll call. Vicki, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Ms. Justice? Ms. Perry? Mr. Roberts? Dr. Rogers? Mr. Austin?
Aye.
Ms. Williams? Dr. Wright? Mr. Woods?
Good. The ayes have it. The rule is approved. Let's do items C and D together. Dave, if we could, I think this is where it gets down to the seat time thing. They're basically, the way I understand it, both the same thing. So you can explain seat time now.
Yes, sir. Now, Currently, there is a requirement that a person must have 133 contact hours. This was to eliminate some just saying if you'll just show up to summer school, we'll just find you a credit somewhere. And it actually requires a student to do time. Now, we believe that there are enough accountability measures in place. There are ways of making sure that that students actually have that knowledge before moving on, it's an arcane requirement. That's not only for summer school, but for adult high school. Vice Chair Perry has found some language in there that probably needs a little bit of adjustment, and I would ask that if you have any other questions, I'll certainly happily answer them, but I believe she'd like to make an adjustment to the adult high school piece to make it comply also with our current accountability system.
Carolyn? Mm-hmm.
I would propose that we strike.
It's 3 and 3C.
Right, but under the proposed rule.
It's
Paragraph
It's
2,
3C.
Section B.
Paragraph
Right.
2, Section B.
yeah,
Okay.
gotcha. Everybody got that? Okay.
I would propose that we strike the phrase, except for the Tennessee proficiency test, which we no longer have. Strike that phrase. Start a new sentence with students. Students are exempt from state test. Those students in those programs do not take the end of course test.
Okay.
Then under item C, section C, place a period after night programs
Mm-hmm.
and remove the phrase provided hours per credit requirements are met,
Okay.
and leave the rest of the
Okay.
section as is.
Okay.
I would just add that this would allow a student to pass upon mastery rather than having to wait around for a testing window necessarily. If an adult learner can do what they need to do in 6 or 8 weeks and cover the course of a semester, it seems impractical to ask them to wait around till the middle of April to sit for an exam.
Okay. Carolyn, would you like to make a motion that we approve items C and D with the modifications that you just covered?
Yes, I would so move.
Okay. Got a second? Further discussion or questions? Any questions? Okay, we'll need a roll call vote. Vicki?
Mr. Ayers? Ms. Justice? Ms. Perry?
Aye.
Mr. Roberts? Dr. Rogers? Mr. Ralston?
Aye.
Ms. Lloyd?
Aye.
Dr. Wright? Mr. Wood?
Aye.
Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you. Next move to the item E, which is the computer technology curriculum. Morgan, you going to present that?
This is for second reading, and we ask your approval. Most of the courses are joint courses developed with CTE, and they were approved October 29th. We have joint classes, one in academic and one in CTE. So these standards are the same, and so we ask your approval on that. The only difference is we have in our academic area computer literacy, because the state says that the students must have 1 year of computers, and that is to cover those students who don't get it in the K-8 area.
Okay. Any questions for Morgan on the computer technology curriculum? Questions? Is there a motion that we approve on final reading the computer technology curriculum? Got a motion? Second? Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Okay, we'll next move to item F, which is the middle school STEM teacher licensure standard. And David, I believe you've got that one.
Thank you, Chair and members. You've already approved the concept of an endorsement, and once licensure standards are approved around that endorsement, then the department can begin issuing licenses in this, or endorsements in this area. This will put Tennessee in a very unique position. We'll be the only state in the union to have an actual STEM license for grades 5 through 9. It will put us in a position to begin building a pipeline of teachers that have dedicated content knowledge around science, mathematics, engineering, and technology that are fully aligned to the needs of our late middle and late elementary and middle grade students. It will allow a teacher to work solely in that grade band, if that's the only endorsement they have. It will allow them to teach through Algebra 1 and through physical science. We have, as you know, we've worked long and hard on this. We're a couple of years into this, and it took a long time. It took a long time to convince people that they could get more, that they would enjoy having teachers in their school that had more dedicated content knowledge at the sacrifice of some flexibility. Our current middle grades teachers are saddled with having to be specialists in 4 areas now, and when you're a specialist in 4 areas, you can't be specialized in too much. So this at least hones the content that they need to know and understand in order to be able to do their job. We're very excited about it. We're getting a lot of interest from other states in how we did this, and other places want to know how we made it work, and we're excited about it. It's another thing we're doing first, so we're pleased with that.
Okay, questions for David? I think this really is a significant step forward, one that we've been encouraging, working on for some time, and I think this is a major improvement in what we have out there. So this is, I think, David, appreciate all your work on this and the work of the others that have been involved in this. The SREB folks yesterday were making a strong point that middle school teachers, if they don't know really know Algebra 1, Algebra 2, they can't prepare kids appropriately to take Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and I think this fits right into that concept. So, important step forward. Any questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve? Got a second? Yeah, okay. Any questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you, David. Okay, the next is the teacher license practice score scale changes policy. Vance, you could do that?
Yes, sir. Chairman Ralston and board members, good morning.
Good morning.
Periodically, ETS revises some of their tests, and then it's up to the states to determine if that's still an appropriate test for our endorsement areas and to set a passing score for those tests. We used to do those on a state-by-state basis at great expense for the individual states. Of late, ETS has provided a means by which states come together. All the states that use a given test send representatives to a standard-setting session, and that task force, and they do this in 2 sessions actually. One group meets on one series of days, and another group is assembled later. Then they compile the results of the 2 task forces and give us a recommended score. You'll see in front of you that we've had some revisions on a number of tests here. The technology education exam, and on this chart, and I hope this helps to make this a little easier to follow, the first column lists the name of the new test and the Praxis ID number. The second column gives the ID number of the test we are currently using, which will soon become the former test, because as of September 1st, these will no longer be available. The third column that's shaded in gray is the current score, and the fourth column is the current pass rate. Now let me pause at this point and say to you that setting the pass score is something we take very, very seriously, and we agonize over to make sure that we're doing this in an appropriate way. And sometimes it's hard to figure exactly the effect of a given score on the eventual pass rate. If you look at the current PE exams we use, 91 is PE content knowledge. You can see that in the second column there. And 92 is PE design and movement, and so on. The current scores for the content knowledge test, the cut score is 152, and yet the pass rate is only 62%. The other test, 92, has a lower score, but a very high pass rate, 98%. Now, why is that? Well, there's any number of possibilities. It could have something to do with the preparation of the individuals. It could have something to do with the difficulty of the test or the breadth of knowledge the test covers. It's hard to nail that down. I say all this to let you know that this is not an exact science, and sometimes we do and have come to this board in years past and asked you to change a passing score. And generally, we try to start a little low, and then if we need to, we'll come to you and ask to raise the pass rate as a result of what the percentage of passing scores has been in those people who take the test from now over the next year or so. Now, there's also been an effort here lately to combine tests so we don't have to have our test takers take so many. You may recall last year we adopted a new special ed exam that cut down the number of tests for special ed teachers from 4 down to 3 so that they wouldn't have to take so many, and each one has its expense involved and so on. Well, in this case, this test 95 for PE will replace those other 2, and it is a combination of the content knowledge and the analysis and design tests that we have used up until now. With the art test, we currently have 3 exams we use, 131, 132, and 133, although 2 of those, it's an either or. You take 2 of the 3 exams in order to meet the requirements for that licensure area. Well, now we'll just have this one test, content knowledge and analysis. And then on the PLTs, they have revised all 4 of them. We currently have the same 4 tests, early childhood, elementary, middle school, and high school. The numbers, as you see, used to be 521, 522. Now they're going to be 621, 622, and so on. You can see the pass rates there, although the passing scores are very close to the same range. The pass rates vary considerably. The lowest of the current group is the middle grades exam with a passing score of 154, and yet it's the lowest pass rate. And again, you wonder, well, what is the reason why is that? Is it something to do with preparation? Is the middle school area a more difficult area? What is it exactly that has led us to that? So we take these multi-state task force, easy for me to say, recommendations, and we get together with other department staff and we talk about, and the people who participated in these task forces, and we talk about what we want to recommend. So, for example, with technical education, Tom D'Appolito, who you may have met in other presentations from the CTE division, was kind of the lead person in that recommendation. One of our former PE consultants, who's no longer with us and whose name escapes me at the moment, led our considerations on the PE test. Jeanette Crosswhite, who you may recall from the fine arts area, led our considerations and had great input on the art exam and so on down the line. So you have this group of recommendations before you. We'd like to present these for your consideration with the caveat that if we see that these scores are so low that the pass rates are really, really high, we may come back to you down the road and ask you to adjust a pass rate upward. It's a tough balance to have high standards on the one hand, where you have high pass rates, and yet on the other hand not set up such a hurdle for some of our candidates that do very well otherwise that they can't get to the licensure situation. I believe Assistant or Deputy Commissioner would like to make a comment.
Okay, yeah, Patrick.
Pardon me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item I know was something that Commissioner Huffman expressed some interest in yesterday, and I know if he were here, he would probably make 2 or 3 points. And I think that to Vance's point, that there is obviously some merit in starting with, perhaps a rate that we're comfortable with as a starting point. But I believe the Commissioner's perspective is the passage rate should not be the driver where we set these scores, that much like we ask for honesty and integrity in AYP and student performance, that we need to continue to focus on setting these practice pass rates accordingly. So moving forward, I know this is an area in which the department will put a really finer grain on analyzing these numbers, and comfortable starting with this point, but just want to let the board know as sort of a policy statement, this is something that the Commissioner particularly is interested in making sure that we set these rates that actually demonstrate content knowledge and the right level of passage for our teacher candidates.
Good, and I would certainly agree with that as a way we ought to proceed. Vance, talk a little bit about the multi-state task force scores there. Is that what other states are using? Is that what?
That is a recommendation to all the states that will be using this test. And then the various states consider that, and there's a big, thick report on every one of these. And then they come to their boards with recommendations, and they will be all over. Everybody doesn't use exactly the same one. Some may pick this one, some lower, some might even go higher. But this is a recommendation. This is not, one that everybody automatically stamps for approval.
Okay. Questions or comments?
I just have one question. So what we're doing today is moving to a new scale, right?
Right.
And
well, we are on the geography test. We're moving from that old 250 to 990 scale down to the 100, 200. And in that case, that 149 is the actual equivalent score of 580 on the larger scale.
So we're not changing.
We're not changing anything, and even the test isn't changing on that one.
But so what's the process for, really looking at this going forward? And I know, what's the process for any change to this scale, would you say?
I'm not sure.
The process for, just reevaluating the cut scores, the higher cut scores.
Okay, well,
I'm sorry.
Every year in November, we get a report from ETS that lists all the pass rates on every test for the test takers that reported their scores to Tennessee. And this is broken down into all kinds of subcategories. You can get it for every college and university. You can get it for every racial group. You can get it for the level of education, whether they have just a bachelor's degree, bachelor's plus, or a master's plus, PhD. And so if we have the resources and the people to dig into that research-wise, there's a wealth of information there that we can use to be able to determine where we want to go.
Thanks.
I guess, I'm basically comfortable with the recommendations that are here, but certainly am very supportive of the comments that Patrick just made, that and am concerned that in all cases we are below the recommendations of the multi-state task force. Now, I don't have enough information to know what these teachers need to know to be able to do an effective job, but I would certainly encourage the department to look closely at and like I said, not use pass rates, but determine what do we need these teachers, new teachers, to know to be certified in these areas.
Well, and we, in our office, we get a lot of calls from LEAs who say that they've had a teacher teaching on an interim B license for 3 years and they can't pass the test. But they're wonderful teachers. Their teacher effect data is right at the top. Everything's excellent except they can't pass the test. Yeah. And those are issues that we have to study very carefully. And when you look across different minority groups and so on, there are people maybe who could do a very good job but just aren't good test takers. And we don't want to, this would be used as a gatekeeper to make sure that they do have the necessary content knowledge, but we don't want that gate to have cut glass and barbed wire on it and keeping some good people out, perhaps.
Okay, questions? Is there a motion that we approve the cut scores as presented? Got a motion, second? Got a second, Lonnie? Okay, any further questions, discussions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you. Thank you, Vince. Okay, educator evaluation rule. Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. You saw this amendment first at the conference call meeting, which allowed you to make an amendment to Rule 0520-02-01-.01 to require the board to develop and recommend the model plan for teacher evaluation to the state board and for the board to approve that model. Since that reading, we have added a second amendment to the same rule number, except it's .02. The legislature changed the ending date by which a teacher must be informed that they will not be reemployed from May 15 to June 15. This amendment changes the date at which the evaluation must be completed from May 15th to June 15th to be parallel to the legislative change, but also to provide maximum amount of time for principals and to complete and superintendents to complete the evaluations of the personnel. Be happy to answer questions.
Okay. Any questions for Gary? Carol?
Why did they change the date?
I think it was to allow maximum amount of time to complete the process, getting as much information back from the student achievement portion of the evaluations in order to allow that to occur in a timely manner. Deputy Commissioner, is that your understanding?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, other questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve final reading, item H? Got a motion, second? Got a second? Any further questions, discussion? Okay, Vicki, if you could call the roll, please.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Ms. Justice? Ms. Terry? Mr. Roberts? Dr. Rogers? Mr. Roscoe?
Aye.
Ms. Sloy? Dr. Wright? Mr. Woods?
Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you. Next item, item I, the teacher education units and program licensure area. Martin.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Twice a year, the department brings recommendations for colleges and universities, and we hope soon for 2 education-related organizations that have been approved for transitional licensure for final action to the board. The recommendations in front of you this morning represent visits to 3 institutions that took place this past fall. The 3 visits are to the University of Tennessee Martin, which was a joint visit with NCATE, and as you see from the recommendations, they have achieved continuing NCATE accreditation, and we're asking you to move final approval on their licensure programs. The second visit was to Lee University. Lee sought first-time NCATE accreditation during this visit and have been indeed accredited by NCATE, and we're bringing you licensure program recommendations for your final action. And the third visit is to Lane College. This was a bit of a different visit. This was a focused visit, meaning that the last full visit produced a result where there were critical deficiencies cited. This was, in effect, a follow-up visit to assess progress made in addressing those critical deficiencies. We're bringing you some recommendations that will continue 5 of those stipulations, which are critical deficiencies. One recommendation where a stipulation is being reduced to a weakness, and then one stipulation that has been corrected. The effect of adopting these recommendations means that within 12 months of your action, we'll conduct a follow-up visit again to Lane College to make sure they're making progress in addressing these 5 critical deficiencies. And I'll be glad to respond to any questions you might have.
Any questions?
Question. Is that Lane?
Yes, I think there was a misprint or a typo
It is Lane.
on the
Yeah,
agenda.
okay.
It is
Lane.
Lane College in Jackson, sir.
Lane.
Yeah, okay. That's Lane.
Yeah.
Okay.
What, certainly the report that's here on Tennessee Martin, Lee University, very, strong programs appear to be, really doing a great job. But the Lane one looks like a continued weakness there.
Yes.
What happens if you go back a year from now and we don't have anything corrected?
Sure. The process allows the institution to address these critical deficiencies. And in effect, they're given a 1-year extension and then potentially 2 additional 1-year extensions. If after a total of 3 years these critical deficiencies are not corrected, potentially a recommendation for denial of approval could be made.
Okay. How many teachers are coming out of Lane? What's the,
Very few. This is what we encountered when we went there 2 years ago. We found that they were producing very few teachers through traditional path. What they're doing, admittedly so on their part, is they were utilizing a process where someone would have an academic major, minor in professional education for graduation, but really not seek any kind of true field-based component. They wouldn't student teach, they would simply get the degree. I've had numerous conversations with the administration as to their commitment to offering a traditional path to licensure. They've taken several measures to indicate they are serious about correcting these deficiencies. As a matter of fact, later this month, I'm going to be meeting their entire teacher ed faculty, and we're going to go over the result of your action today so that they have a very clear understanding of the expectations.
okay, other questions, comments? Okay, is there a motion that we approve the recommendations that we have in front of us here? Got a motion to approve? Is there a second? Got a second. Okay, any further discussion? Questions? Carolyn?
I just want to be sure I understand that if following this coming year, these things are not corrected, then we could deny approval for them for...
Eventually. What will happen as a result of your action is within 12 months, we'll conduct another visit there. If we see there is adequate progress, they could potentially get 1 more year of approval with stipulations. If after that 3rd year they do not correct these deficiencies, it is conceivable we could deny approval or come to you with a recommendation of denial of approval.
What if we didn't approve today?
They would have 1 12-month period to correct critical deficiencies. They could admit no one to their program. Those who are currently in the pipeline, if they could complete the program within that 12-month period, could do so. Then they would have to stay out of the teacher ed business for an approximate 3-year period.
I'm just wondering about their seriousness about improving their program, because we've had them on our agenda, I think, at least 3 years in a row.
This is the 2nd year in a row.
Okay.
I know this is repetitive, but I have had a lot of conversation with their central administration about this. As a matter of fact, it was 2 years ago this spring I met with their chief academic officer, their institutional effectiveness officer, the head of their teacher ed program, and basically challenged them to really analyze what they're doing and whether or not they indeed wanted to continue to be offering a teacher education option to their students. What they have done in the interim is they have hired a new teacher ed director who is also an NCATE Board of Examiner member, is extremely familiar with the standards. They've hired 2 full-time new faculty in teacher preparation. They've designed an assessment system that addresses our standards. And what we're going to be looking at is to make sure what they have developed in terms of planning is actually put into place. And that's what we're expecting to see within this 12-month period.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, is there a motion? Do we have a motion?
Second.
We got a motion and second, okay. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Martin, thank you. We appreciate the good work that you do on these teacher education programs. Great work, and we appreciate it. Okay, item J, the salary schedules. Art.
Good morning again. The agenda item that you have before you, it reflects a 1.6% across the board increase on the BEP minimum salary schedule. There is one slight typo in the agenda that says 1.65%, but the actual agenda item itself reflects the 1.6%, and the calculations are based on a 1.6% BEP salary increase.
Okay. This is something that the board needs to approve. It's always been approved by the legislature and out there, but we need to take this action. Any questions? Is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second. Any questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Thank you, Art. We'll move now to BEP 2.0.
BEP 2.0. You will note that this agenda item reflects about $51.5 million in inflationary adjustments to maintain full funding of the BEP. All other technical parameters related to the formula are basically the same as in previous years.
Okay. Any questions for Art? Basically the 1.6 and the inflationary increases, and which I think is significant, given the physical condition of the state and the other changes that were made in the budgets to be able to maintain the BEP 2.0 at full funding with the inflationary increases. I think is really a significant statement about the commitment to education in the state. So it's great that we can approve this. Is there a motion that we approve? Got a motion, second? Got a second. Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Art. Appreciate it. Okay, let's go to item L, which is the Tennessee Learning Center leadership policy, and Sarah's going to do that. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You heard about this yesterday, a bit from my colleague Tim Gaddis, but essentially this item is to make some amendments to the 2008 Learning Center leadership policy, specifically looking at the principal evaluation tools and processes that were not clearly outlined in that original policy. What we went through with you yesterday outlined a little bit of the process this past year to field test some of those instruments in the 2008 policy that do speak to principal evaluation. We worked with a principal work group that was led by Dr. Nixon. It included staff from the department as well as superintendent representatives, and they worked to refine those pieces from the 2008 policy for a field test that occurred this past spring. The results of that field test came back to us through our partners TNCRED, who do the evaluation of First to the Top initiatives. They conducted 3 regional focus groups, and we talked a bit about this yesterday. But from those focus groups, we found that there were some revisions that needed to be made to those initial tools and processes that we had field tested. So what you see before you at the end of that policy are amendments that essentially take that feedback and have made those changes that were requested from our field test participants that really made sense to the principal work group, made sense to the state board and the Department of Ed, and essentially streamline the process, streamline the tools, try to draw on things that principals and superintendents are already doing around evaluation that speak to both the TILs, which is the foundation of the principal evaluation process, but also things like the school improvement plan and the ways that they are using data to analyze and plan and chart school goals. You can see that there's one other significant change that was made in terms of so moving forward, the principal evaluation under the new system will include the quantitative components as planned. So the 35% growth component will still be the school-wide value added as was the plan before the field test, as will the 15% student achievement be from the menu of options that you all approved back in April. Really what we're talking about is the qualitative instrument and the changes that we've made around that 50% component for principals. And you can see there, too, on page 2 that, again, the bulk of that qualitative instrument will still be based on the TILs, the Tennessee Instructional Leadership Standards that form that foundation for effective leadership. And the results of our field test came back proof positive that principals and superintendents alike really feel like that does describe effective leadership. Their thoughts were only around kind of streamlining the process for assessing those standards. So 35% of that qualitative component will still be based on the TILs, just in a more streamlined rubric, and that's also included at the back of the policy. But the biggest change is around the quality of teacher evaluation and including that as an additional component. Our working group, our field test participants, state board, and department staff all felt that that was a really important component to include moving forward if we're hoping to see this cultural change in terms of the quality of teacher evaluation, that principals really should be focused on making sure that that's done with fidelity, that the components align, that we see a logical relationship between the quantitative scores for a teacher and the qualitative scores. So that's included now as a 15% component in the qualitative instrument. Essentially, those are the changes that we've made. You see the forms before you, and the agenda item is just to get your approval on that streamlined process for principal evaluation as it will amend this 2008 policy. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any about those changes.
Okay, questions for Sarah? Any questions? Sarah indicated we reviewed this pretty thoroughly yesterday, and I think that we're making some significant steps forward with the evaluation process, both for teachers and principals, and this is certainly an important piece of it. Okay, any questions? Okay, is there a motion we approve the principal evaluation policy on final reading? Got a motion? Second. Any questions? Discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, the next item is the educator evaluation policy, non-public schools. Sarah, you going to do that too?
Yep, I'm going to stay put if I can. This one is a shorter item, but as I explained yesterday at the workshop, again, one of the changes that we need to make is around non-public school licensure based on the new evaluation policy that was passed by the board in April. And that's because, again, with the quantitative components moving forward, non-public schools are essentially unable to complete that portion of the evaluation and therefore have the problem of licensure in terms of both initial licensure and advancing of licensure. So again, as I explained yesterday and is explained in this agenda item, we've met with a host of folks around this issue, including our staff in licensure, the state board, other staff in our First to the Top office, as well as the advisory committee around non-publics. And all felt that, again, as a short-term solution, we should put a moratorium on the requirements for the quantitative components for non-public school educators this coming school year. The reason for doing that would be that we would have time to have a thoughtful conversation and discussion and look into the best way to move forward for licensure for these non-public school educators, knowing that, again, the state tests are going to be a near impossibility for them to fulfill around this new state system for evaluation, but that we want to make sure that what we do put in place for licensure for those educators is the best plan moving forward. So for the next year, we would propose a moratorium on the new system for non-publics for the purpose of licensure. That would mean that we would continue to train them on the old framework that they were using, that's a qualitative measure, and that would allow them to advance in licensure this coming school year, and that we will revisit this issue over the course of the next year with all the appropriate stakeholders to see about making a decision that would be a more long-term solution.
Okay. Questions for Sarah? Any questions on what we have here? Is there a motion to approve? Got a motion? Second? Got a second? Any questions or discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Sarah, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Okay, the next item is the item that's been added is the Tennessee alternate salary schedules, the incentive plans, and Eve's going to present that. Okay.
Good morning. Yesterday, we reviewed the 5 alternative salary schedules that were created through the Innovation Acceleration Fund and the Teacher Incentive Fund, and those would be for Knox County, Putnam County, Trousdale County, Lexington City, and Johnson County. Over the last year, these districts have completed meetings with stakeholder groups, feasibility analysis, completed delivery plans, sustainability plans, communication plans, professional development plans, and sustainability plans. These districts have devised diverse plans looking at how to compensate teachers differently. And they have based these plans in the teacher evaluation, Tennessee's new teacher evaluation model, using the evaluation scores and other measures to provide salary increases and bonuses for effective and highly effective teachers and principals. We submit these 5 alternative salary schedules today for your approval, and we're happy to take questions at this time.
Okay, questions? Any questions? Okay, we spent a good bit of time talking about these yesterday, and I think it probably answered most of the questions that may be out there. Any further questions? I think the only comment I make, I think, is that obviously these things are very diverse. They head in different directions. I think we do need to see these as pilots for, what we may want to do down the road someplace. And I think it's important that we, track the results here of each of these and see if we can learn from it. And as we go forward, there's going to be more and more interest in bonus systems or in performance-related compensation. And I'm not sure we've got the right answer yet on any of these, so I think we need to watch them carefully and learn from the experience and make sure that we can design something that really does serve our needs.
And we are collecting a lot of data on these plans through our partnership with TNCRED, and so we certainly will be tracking the success of all of these plans, and hopefully we will have some successful pilots from these plans.
All right. Okay. Is there a motion to approve these the 4 pilots that are out there? Got a motion to approve? Second. Any further discussion or questions? Okay. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Eve, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll now move to an appeal hearing, and Bill Wilson's with us. Bill, welcome back. Haven't seen you in a while, but good to have you with us. You go to explain what we need to do here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the State Board. It's a pleasure to be back. You have before you an appeal of a teacher license revocation by Mr. Raymond Tate. Mr. Tate's license was permanently revoked by an initial order from the administrative law judge in March of 2011. He indicated a desire to appeal that to you, yet the record indicates he has not filed any substantive briefs or made any effort to pursue that appeal. Your options today are to adopt the initial order entered by the judge, enter an order of your own with findings of fact and conclusions of law, or remand the matter back to an administrative law judge for further proceedings. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have concerning this.
Okay, questions? Jean?
I have just some questions. First of all, let me say that I'm not for anybody that abuses children in any way, but there's just some discrepancies in this that alarm me, and so I'm concerned about the way that we're going to go about taking his license away from him. Number one is that if he really was taking care of other students from a bully, then that concerns me, that because a lot of times teachers' hands are tied in big school systems, and they don't have a way to to go about this bullying process. That's my first concern. Another concern is the discrepancies in there. That he's called Miss Tate, and he's instead of Mr. Tate, and that in one of the forms it says it's sexual battery instead of assault. And so, just with the discrepancies there, and that he received his letter on September the 2nd. That's when it's stamped, and it was due back September the 3rd. And so the timeline of him getting his information in, I don't know this man, but looking at what we have as far as of what the permanent is permanent, and the temporary means it's automatically reinstated. Well, I don't want that if this is a case that is. It's just, it seems his correspondence back was that he had been convicted without even providing proof.
My response to that would be twofold. First, I'd like to address the issue of being indicated as a perpetrator of child abuse by the Department of Children's Services. The record indicates that he had an opportunity to administratively appeal that finding and that posting. And again, as the record seems to indicate, he intended to do that or file some notice of intent to do that, yet never followed up on that, never exercised his right to appear and defend, if you will. I think the same would hold true with respect to the teacher license revocation. He was given appropriate due process, notice, and an opportunity to be heard, yet and it did not appear to defend, and a default went down against him. Again, much as the posture we're in here today, he indicated a desire to appeal, yet he has not filed a brief in support of that appeal here today. Now, he would have the opportunity, if you permanently revoke his license, to come back and reapply at some future time. My only footnote to that comment would be, as long as he is indicated as a perpetrator of child abuse, he cannot be employed by any public school system in Tennessee. So I think the true issue here, ladies and gentlemen, is once he clears his name with the Department of Children's Services by whatever administrative or judicial means may be available to him at this point, I think that's the crux for this gentleman at this point, to clear that, then proceed with the process to attempt to resecure a teaching license in Tennessee.
And I think that's really the critical issue, as far as I'm concerned, that Bill just went through, is that the real issue, I think, is with the Department of Children's Services, and he's got to, clear that up. I don't think we have much choice as long as that's there.
I don't believe you do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion? Bill has outlined the options there, and I guess the first one is to what's the right words for it? To uphold the findings of the adopt and hold in part the initial order is.
Yes, sir. You would be adopting the initial order that was entered by the administrative law judge, I believe, on March the 16th of 2011.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. I would just say that we need to be really sure that we don't have one of these situations to where someone is notified of a right or notified of an action and given time to appeal, and in fact it's one day. That would be enough to make me vote against an action. Now, this could be just a very uncommon occurrence that never, hardly ever happens. But I think we all probably have had, although it's probably not of actions like this, have had these situations where people tell you something, you've got a certain notice, and come to find out the date may have already passed. Be very, very careful of that. And that's my only comment on this case.
Now, as far as the notice for submitting material for this, he was given considerably more than 1 day.
Yes,
so
Mr. Chairman, that was
the 1
just
day goes
confirmed.
back to an earlier hearing.
The 1 day matter goes back to the appeal with the Department of Children's Services.
Yeah.
Well, they need to be careful about that too.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions, discussion, or is there a motion? Got a motion?
I move that we adopt in whole the initial order as the final order.
Okay. Is there a second? Got a second to Carolyn's motion? Second. Got a second. Okay. Any discussion? Further discussion? Is that we uphold basically? The finding of the initial order, administrative judge.
I just want to say, so he was guilty before. I mean, he wasn't innocent until proven guilty. He was guilty until proven innocent by the Department of Human Services.
Well,
essentially by that 1 day.
The record reflects that he was charged with sexual battery by an authority figure and subsequently pled guilty to assault of a minor. That, I believe, is what triggered his name being turned over to the department and placed on that register.
Okay, so he did. It wasn't a misprint that he was charged with sexual battery. He was actually charged with sexual battery, and then he pleaded assault.
According to the information that's in the record, that's what transpired.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions, discussion? Okay. Let's see. Do we need a roll call on this? Okay. Vicki, if you could call the roll, please.
Mr. Ayers?
Aye.
Ms. Justice? Aye. Ms. Perry? Aye. Mr. Roberts?
Aye.
Dr. Rogers?
Abstain.
Mr. Ralston?
Aye.
Ms. Lawyon? Dr. Wright?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Okay, the ayes have it, so the order is upheld. Thank you, Bill, appreciate it. Good to see you again. Okay, we now go to teacher license actions. Danelle, looks like you've been busy.
As I say, teachers have been busy. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. You have in your materials a list of individuals whom the State Board Review Committee recommends for license denial, suspension, or revocation. At this point, I would just like to take any questions if you have any.
Okay, questions concerning any of the actions that are being recommended here?
Two on Stacy Frazier and Lisa Hoffmeister. So they were already lost their license, and then we're just reinstating them. Those are the ones that jumped out at me.
Okay, these have been suspended for 1 year. As Stacy Frazier, what ended up happening is in the transition between myself and Rich, we discovered that there was a mistaken offer of 1 year for Stacy instead of the discussion of 3 years. So when her counsel got that, and when we discovered that discrepancy, we tried to go back and offer the 3 years, but of course her attorney would not take that. In effect, we had to continue with the 1 year that we had initially offered her. However, I will state that she's been out of work for 2 years, so in effect, she's already had a 2-year suspension. So when you vote on this, she will be reinstated on August 18th, which will actually be 2 years instead of 1. And Ms. Hoffmeister, let me get to her. The same thing, pretty much when the report is received, it was received in October of last year. So instead of it being effective when you guys vote on it today, it'll actually be retroactive from the October 2nd when it was reported in 2010 to actually be a year to October 2nd of 2011.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, is there a motion that we approve the recommended actions? And let me add, we really appreciate the work of the staff in going through this. These are, complicated situations, and I think they do an excellent job of looking back over previous actions and making sure that we are being consistent with the actions that are are being recommended here, and it's a tough job, and we appreciate that.
I'd also like to say the list is long because we did have a lapse in the transition. So hopefully we won't have 30-something actions every time.
I fully agree and support that. Okay, any further discussion or questions? Okay, call the roll, please, Vicki. Do we? I'm sorry. I thought do we not have a motion? I'm sorry. Okay, is there a motion that we approve the recommended actions?
So moved.
Got a motion? Second? Got a second?
Second.
Second. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, now, Vicki. Thank you.
Mr. Ayers? Ms. Justice? Ms. Perry? Mr. Roberts? Dr. Rogers? Mr. Ralston?
Aye.
Ms. Loyan? Dr. Wright?
Aye.
Mr. Woods?
Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Let me mention the remaining meetings that we have for this year. The November 4th meeting of this board is on the calendar, and we've also placed on the calendar meetings for next year. And these are the same as we mentioned in the workshop yesterday, with one change. They will be January 26 and 27. 27 be the board meeting, 26 be the workshop. April 19th and 20th, no change in that. July 26 and 27, no change there. And then October, this is a change, October 18 and 19, we moved that up 1 week from what we talked about yesterday. So January 26, 27, April 19, 20, July 26, 27, and October 18, 19. Those are the meetings for next year. And if we, if you run into significant conflicts on the calendar some way, we can adjust, but we'd like to get those on the calendar and keep them that way if we possibly can. Okay, certainly appreciate it. Good meeting. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Chip.
One thing real quickly, as the 2011-2012 year begins, we just want to say a thank you from all the students across the state, once again to the board members, as well as to all the teacher, faculty, and everyone in the Department of Education for all that you all do. Someone once said, a teacher affects eternity. He or she can never tell where his or her influence stops. And even though you all may not be teachers in a classroom, everyone in this room has done a huge part in helping all of our students across the state, and we all want to say thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Chip. Thank you. That's well said, and we certainly appreciate, as I said earlier, your service on this board. It's been great, and certainly one of the best student members we've had for this board. Thank you for your participation. Meeting is adjourned.